Welcome back to the Ultraviolet Tide. We are back with an episode of the top 5 on the Tide for May. And May is a very special month because it is Melanoma Awareness Month. So we wanted to bring an extra special episode and bring on a special guest. So of course, I have Leah Adams joining me, but I also have Dr. Mani joining us as well. So Dr. Mani, welcome to your first ever episode of the top 5 on the Tide. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. Leah and I have really tried to every single month incorporate a new expert to bring in a fun take to this episode. So the fact that you are joining us this month makes us very excited. And I know we're going to have such a great conversation. So I will do a little bit of a brief introduction into you and then turn it over to you to share a little bit more about yourself with the audience. And then Leah's going to lead us into our first story of the month. But without further ado, Dr. Mani Javvaji is a Columbia-trained, double board-certified dermatologist, skin cancer surgeon, and work-life balance expert. She uses her platform to share helpful tools and tips to optimize work-life balance, personal growth, and productivity to ultimately make more room for the fun stuff. We're so excited to have you, Dr. Mani, as we dive into today's top stories. And I'm really excited to hear your tips on work-life balance because as a brand new mom, I am trying to figure out that balance for myself. So, share a little bit more about you, your expertise, and how you kind of dove into your expertise.
Yeah, so my first and foremost profession and calling is being a dermatologist and being a skin cancer surgeon. I do something called Mohs surgery on a daily basis, and that is a very specialized type of skin cancer surgery. So, being on this podcast and getting the opportunity to talk about melanoma is really my jam. That's what I went to school for. That's what I love. That's what I do for my day job. As far as the work-life balance piece of it, that kind of came out of necessity of having such a high level, I think, career and having to do multiple projects and being able to figure out how to use my time. It's really another passion of mine outside of medicine. And I love the ability to be able to talk about both of them on my platforms.
Yeah, it's so important to do that. And I mean, I am thoroughly impressed by all the things that you're able to do. I mean, as I was kind of looking through your resume, I was very excited when you said yes to come onto the podcast. So Leah, do you want to kick us off with our first story so we can really get into all the fun stuff and we can geek out about these stories?
Absolutely. No, really excited to dive in for this episode being Melanoma Awareness Month and having a very special guest with us to really, pick apart these stories. And so the first one is from the Bravo TV source, and it's titled Ariana Madix opens up about her melanoma journey. So for those of you listening, Ariana Madix has been cancer-free for 7 years. And in 2018, the Vanderpump Rules alum got diagnosed with melanoma, and she is now sharing updates on her recovery and health journey. The Something About Her co-owner took to Instagram on Wednesday, March 26th, so a little while ago, where she explained how she discovered she had a skin cancer and what she did to treat it. It's was quoted, "I had noticed a dark spot here," she said, rubbing her chest, which is very ironic because that's where my melanoma was, also on my chest. And she was quoted saying, "But it was a few years before I decided to do anything about it. A major push for me was to see the dermatologist came from my Instagram followers." And so she said, "I went to see a dermatologist and he immediately made me see a plastic surgeon." And so the article went on to talk about how the surgeon was able to remove the mole, but testing revealed that it was a much bigger issue than just a mole. And then she was quoted, "I'm so glad that I went that day because it was not benign. It was melanoma." She continued to say. And it said this resulted in the doctor removing a much larger area of skin and lymph nodes from under her arm to make sure that the cancer had not spread, which it did not, thankfully. And this left Ariana having a very large scar, which she wears with pride and says, "Now I just have this lovely scar across my chest," she explained. And this article really resonated with me, Erica, because I resonate with Ariana. My melanoma was on my chest right here, and it was a really funky looking mole. And, I didn't think it was anything serious. I just thought it was a mole. And if anything, it was precancerous, right? You always hear these stories of, oh, it was precancerous. We'll just, zap it off, freeze it off, cut it out, and move on with life. And that wasn't my situation, because just like Ariana, I had stage 1A bordering stage 1B melanoma, and I didn't just get things cut out and move on. I went under surgery. I was under anesthesia. It was a full, day of prep for surgery and, post surgery. And I also had lymph nodes removed, just like Ariana did as well, to make sure, because I had bordering stages, that my melanoma did not spread to my lymph nodes and my organs. And so I think when I read this story, Erica, and I'd love to hear, both of your thoughts on this, is I think it's really important anytime somebody in the public eye shares their story when it comes to stuff like this, because Ariana has an opportunity to really educate and make other women that may look up to her or that are like her more aware of their largest organ, which is their skin, and realize that when our skin is our largest organ, we have to take care of it. And when we see things that are unusual, things that are changing on us, things that weren't there maybe, a year ago, we need to keep an eye on that. That's kind of our due diligence to ourselves to make sure we're protecting ourselves. So I commend her for sharing her story and really bringing awareness to this. But what were your thoughts on this article?
I'll hop in really fast on this because Ariana Madix is a really big name kind of surfacing around in pop culture right now. There's a lot of drama on Vanderpump Rules last season, and I know that's not the most professional thing to kind of dive into, but as someone who is very into reality TV, I did have to bring up the point that she is really a big name circulating right now. And she originally shared her story back in 2018, I think it was, and now it's kind of resurfacing, and she's been tied into several campaigns. One of them was Ban the Tan, which Refinery 29 and the Skin Cancer Foundation did back in 2023. And just the fact now that she is such a large name that so many people started to learn more about her story over the past year when her situation came out about her boyfriend like cheating on her. It was a whole drama, Scannival. Um, she's now such a big name. So the fact that this is kind of resurfacing, it's even more tied to her story and more opportunity to really get it out there to as many people as possible. So the fact that she has this like newfound fame and really hasn't shied away from sharing her story and using her platform to support these incredible causes for early detection and helping young people understand the importance of not getting in tanning beds and taking care of your skin is really exciting for me. But that was just kind of a nerdy take that I had to throw in there. Dr. Mani, I want to know your take that might be a little bit more professional and a little bit more tied together than that.
No, I agree with what you're saying. I think I'm not a big reality TV person, but I think she has a really big platform and she's doing a really great thing by sharing her personal story. Because if you think about it, her audience is probably young women, mainly in their like 20s, 30s, 40s. And this is a really prime group of people to be able to educate and to say, hey, if you have that weird mole on your body that like people have kind of been pointing out to you, don't just wait. Don't just think. I think younger women have a tendency to just say, oh, you know what? It's fine. It's not going to be me, and not really do anything about it. And I think her story really highlights the importance of if there's something that looks suspicious on you, like take action and don't wait and actually do something about it. If you go see your dermatologist for something that people have been pointing out to you or that you yourself have been wondering about, and you get it biopsied, if it's nothing, then that's great. At least you have the peace of mind of knowing that it's nothing. But if it is something, then at least you know that you didn't wait and that you've caught it promptly, because as we know, when it comes to melanoma, early detection is literally everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. That's all great points. And another thing, Leah, that I don't know if you wanted to dive into or bring up, the Instagram component of it, I find super fascinating because we talk a lot about how our community really started on Instagram. So I found that component of it really fascinating.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that social media sometimes gets a bad rap, like, oh, it's social media. Like, you can't trust this. You have to filter it, all this good stuff or all that kind of stuff. And, there's truth to that, right? There's always good with the bad. There could be a lot of cons around social media, a lot of negatives. But as Erica just mentioned, I found a lot of positivity and community and support on social media. My life would be very different if I would have never, back in 2019, after my melanoma diagnosis, if I never shared about my story and posted my photo that I did, of my chest. And that really just changed my life. I mean, it's allowed me to connect with so many amazing people in the melanoma community. And, before I did that, I felt really alone because I couldn't find anybody else that was my age, that was a woman, that could resonate with a melanoma story. And, little did I know, there were hundreds and thousands of women just like me dealing with melanoma of all different types and stages and different scars and different areas. And it just made me feel so reassured that I wasn't alone, because it's something that not everybody always wants to talk about. And I think that also ties into the misinformation and lack of education and awareness around melanoma, because not enough people are talking about it and how serious it is. So, like I said, I really commend Ariana for doing it. And, I can end with saying that she was quoted at the end of the article saying, "Skin cancer can be so fast and aggressive. I was lucky and mine wasn't moving very quickly, but I don't want any of my friends or family to be in a position where they don't get checked and then it's too late." And I resonated with that quote so much because that's exactly how I felt. I'm extremely grateful that my melanoma was caught early, and there's a reason why I'm still here. And so because of that reason, I'm going to continue to educate and advocate and share my story.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's easier now to really hop on the sun safety bandwagon because there are so many innovations out there that make it easier than ever in which to do so. So our next story really ties in that. And the story itself is a little bit shorter, but I wanted to pull it because I thought it would be a super interesting conversation for us to have. So the source is Trend Hunter, and the article is L'Oreal Research and Innovation Japan unveils self-repairing UV tech. So, self-repairing UV tech is set to revolutionize sun care as L'Oreal Research and Innovation Japan unveils a groundbreaking formula debuted at the Lancome's UV Expert Extreme Shield SPF 50 plus, which is a mouthful.
Yeah.
But basically, kind of the breakdown of what this is that the sunscreen is really trying to provide even more protection than ever before. The sunscreen offers high protection and a breakthrough self-repairing mechanism that strengthens its defense against UV damage. What makes this SPF different? So unlike traditional sunscreens that really degrade over time, what they're trying to do with this is create a formula that spontaneously repairs its microstructure when exposed to external stressors, which ensures that longer lasting protection. So Lancome calls it its first ever self-repairing UV protection, promising a 6 times stronger resistance to sweat and friction than conventional formulas. So I'm going to stop there because I am not the expert on any of these things, but we have someone here who is. So Dr. Mani, have you heard of a sunscreen innovation like this, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so when I read about this, I thought it was really interesting. In my mind, the way that I think about it is that this technology that they're talking about, polymeric gel particles, kind of creates like a mesh or like a net, a microscopic net on your skin. And then when there's sweat or there's friction, that creates kind of like a hole in that net. This sunscreen will kind of repair itself and restore that net. And it seems like they've tested it in 245 Asian women, and it did pretty well. So basically, what it is kind of like a long-lasting sunscreen that's a little bit more resilient or a little bit more durable. And it's exciting, but I'm cautiously optimistic about things like this. A lot of times, right, when there's new technology that comes out in the skincare product world, it takes a while to kind of figure out the real efficacy of it and the real safety of it long term. So whenever these new products come out, I always am kind of cautious about it and a little bit skeptical, because I like to see things used and studied over the long term to see really what the long term effects are. A couple of things right away that kind of came out about this in my mind were there's a potential for some overconfidence here, meaning because it's marketed as like a very long lasting sunscreen, I'm a little afraid that people are going to be putting this on their skin and being a little bit too overconfident about it when they still do need to reapply, or maybe they're sweating too much, getting wet in the water too much, doing too much like friction with their clothing or whatever, to where it's kind of rubbing off and they're not realizing it. So that is something that should be paid attention to when it comes to these kind of long lasting sunscreens. And the last thing is too, when things are very long lasting on the skin, you have to think about it causing allergies or irritation on the skin too, because like I'm someone that has ultra sensitive skin and has a lot of skin allergies. And so the longer that something stays on your skin, let's say if you do have a broken skin barrier or you're sensitive to things, it can just cause that much more of a problem because it's sticking and staying on your skin for a very long time. So those are kind of the things that came up with this. It will be interesting to see kind of what happens in the long term and if this really takes off.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I was just going to say it reminds me of another sunscreen on the market. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Isdene, which has like DNA repairsomes. I think they kind of branded their own term around it, which it basically is supposed to repair DNA damage in skin cells and strengthen the skin's natural repair mechanisms. And it's super fascinating because when I hear stuff like that, I get excited, but I also wonder how much of that is like marketing. And how much of it is actually like an enhancement, because I do know the US is like super behind when it comes to sunscreen innovation. So I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I also have that same opinion. I wonder how much of this is really marketing too. I think a good amount of it, to be honest, is. So I always am a little bit cautious and a little bit skeptical when it comes to stuff like that. But you know, it's important to do the research and see what studies are out there and things like that when it comes to a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I do think that a lot of it is marketing, and unfortunately, with the way that our regulations are, things can be marketed in a way that's can be a little bit misleading to the general public.
I read this article and I was like, this is really, really cool. However, it sounds like this type of sunscreen innovation is very much trying to mimic the whole reasoning behind sun safe clothing and UPF clothing, right? So, UPF
Yeah.
clothing, as we know,
Mm-hmm.
is something that doesn't get washed off, right? It doesn't get rubbed off. You don't have to reapply it. You wear it and it stays on. And so I just think that it's really interesting that we have now a sunscreen and a brand, a skincare brand and product trying to mimic really what the purpose of sun safe clothing is. And as you know, Erica and I have talked about this on the podcast before, and Dr. Mani, you may have also heard this, that sunscreen doesn't always work for everybody. And, some people can be really picky about their sunscreen, right? Whether it comes to chemical versus mineral or spray versus lotion or this, that, and the other thing. And what's really nice about sun safe clothing and UPF clothing is that, yes, there's different styles of clothing, but at the end of the day, like there's not as many differences of clothing as there are in like sunscreen brands or products. So there's could be more of an agreement around sun safe clothing kind of being a really good option for skin protection that has that long lasting impact that may, to your point, Dr. Mani, not cause skin irritation or a rash or potentially, impact the skin barrier or, all the things that, involve skin. So I just thought this was really interesting that it's, to me, when I read this, I go, oh, so there's trying to be like a product, that's coming out that really wants to mimic the whole mission behind UPF clothing and sun safe clothing. So I just wanted to put that plug in there too, that, my thing as a melanoma survivor, I think the best combo is using, sunscreen and sun safe clothing together. I think they're a duo made in heaven. But I also talk to people online on social media that really find it challenging to wear sunscreen or remember to reapply it. And that's why I always say, well, there's also sun safe clothing and you seeking shade and watching UV rays and et cetera, et cetera. So that was actually my take, which was a different spin, but I wanted to share that perspective as well.
Leah, I love that, and I couldn't agree more. I think that I'm a huge fan of sun safe clothing and UPF clothing. I think whenever I talk to patients about sun safety, I tell them like, okay, I get it. Like, let's be real. Sunscreen is messy. It's inconvenient. People don't like using it. It's still really important, I think, to like get past that and still use it. But I tell all my patients that you need to use like multimodal treatment, meaning like multimodal sun protection. And one thing is usually just not enough. So I tell them like wear sunscreen, yes, and you should reapply, every 2 hours, yes, but also layer on the UPF clothing and your wide brim hats. I think people's noses and ears and lips, I work on skin cancers on those areas a lot, and those get forgotten a lot. So using a wide brim hat, the clothing, and then also just when you're outside, let's say you have an umbrella that you can sit under as opposed to sitting outside, you've got to seek shade whenever you can. So it's not just one thing, you've got to do all of the things, and all of that in combination is really going to be what protects you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think my thought too, as a brand new parent, is I can't put sunscreen on my son this summer because he's too young. So he'll be under
Mhm.
6 months. So I will be absolutely layering him in sun protective clothing and keeping him out of the sun. But as he gets older and can wear sunscreen, you better believe I'm using every single tool in my toolkit to make sure that he is protected because kids will get I mean, I, as a kid, spent every single summer outside because it's so much fun. You're out with your friends, you're at the pool, you're playing outside. And I did not know the repercussions of, not listening to my parents and reapplying sunscreens.
I think that when you have babies that are too young to use sunscreen, the best thing is really protecting them from the sun by putting them in the shade and layering on literally all of the clothing, all of the UPF clothing, all of the hats, and really protecting their skin because it's really delicate at this point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and that is a really great segue to our next article, which is from Science Daily. And the title of the article is Blind to the Burn: Misconceptions about Skin Cancer Risk in the United States. And so in this article, it talks about a study by researchers at Florida Atlantic University's Charles E. Schmidt College of Medicine, explored associations between the reported number of sunburns and socio-demographic characteristics, in addition to examining the prevalence of protective skin behaviors adopted by the US adult population in a nationally representative sample. So, as I feel like all of us on this podcast may know the statistic, but our listeners may not, experiencing 5 or more severe sunburns between the ages of 15 and 20 increases the risk of melanoma by 80% and non-melanoma skin cancers by 68%. And this study is among the few to examine the relationship between perceived cancer risk, concern about being diagnosed, confidence in health, sunburn history, and the prevalence of sun protection behaviors, all in relation to sociodemographic factors in the US adults. And findings reveal statistically significant associations between the number of sunburns and sociodemographic factors. And so I read this article, and a lot of this was already kind of some information or inklings that I already was kind of aware of. But I think it really speaks to the power of people are not always aware of really what getting a sunburn can mean in the long term kind of aspect of things, especially when people may or may not know their risk factors for developing skin cancer or melanoma in the long term aspect as well. So, I always like to speak from personal experience, right? So I know Erica and I have talked about this before. She and I both have had many sunburns in our lives. And I also spent a lot of time outside, a lot of time in tanning beds. And growing up in a society where tan, skin was praised and looked upon as, a beautiful beauty standard or what have you, for my skin, I had to burn in order to tan. So really that was kind of phase one of achieving the outcome of a tan. And little did I know any of these statistics. And living in a climate of where I live, since this article talked about demographics and sociodemographics, I live in Ohio and we do not see the sun a lot. And so anytime we did see the sun, we took advantage of it and we spent the whole day outside, laid out in the sun. And when the sun wasn't out, I ventured to tanning beds, and I did it even before the age of 18. My mom had to sign off on my tanning bed contract or application or whatever you wanted to call it. And she and I even went together, for one of them. And again, you don't think that something like this can happen to you, or really just using a tanning bed once or getting, a sunburn, especially one that's blistering, can really impact your risk of developing melanoma over time as you get older. And so I just really thought that, this is real data showing real life things that are happening to people of all ages, and especially, younger and younger people now are getting melanoma and skin cancer. It's not a older person cancer of how it once was perceived. Younger and younger people are getting it. And so I just could really relate to the data around this article and the statistics. But Erica and Dr. Mani, whoever wants to go first, what are your thoughts on this article?
Yeah, Leah, I think you bring up a lot of really great points. What I got from this article is that in general, I think people underestimate their own personal risk of potentially getting skin cancer. And so it's something that we really need to be aware of. And I think it's a good idea to have everyone see their dermatologist at least once a year, especially if they've got history of a lot of sun exposure over their lifetime and in their youth, or if they still are young and tend to be out in the sun a lot. So see your dermatologist for a skin exam once a year, and then also to do self-exams. When it comes to melanoma, I know you two know about this, but just to kind of reiterate for our audience, we talk about the ABCDEs of melanoma and like checking out our moles and kind of keeping an eye on everything. It's an acronym that kind of helps us identify like, okay, maybe these moles need to get checked out and maybe we need to go to a dermatologist for these. But A is asymmetry, B is irregular borders, C is colors, so a mole that's multiple colors, D is diameter bigger than 6 millimeters, so bigger than the back of a pencil eraser. And then E, which is the most important one, is evolution or change. And then, so that one's a really important one. If there's any moles that are changing on your body, that's a red flag, and that's something that needs to be seen by the dermatologist. And we also talk about ugly duckling too, which is like if you have a bunch of moles and one of them sticks out and like doesn't really look like the rest, then that's also a red flag. But to your point about the tanning beds and tanning, Leah, there's another statistic that totally blew me away, which is that with one tanning session, your risk of melanoma increases by 2% with each tanning session that people have done. And I grew up as a fellow Midwesterner. I grew up in Oklahoma also when like in the wintertime and stuff, I had a lot of friends during high school growing up that would go to tanning beds all the time. I'm South Asian descent, so my skin's already a little bit darker. So I didn't do that, fortunately, but I had so many friends that would go to tanning beds. I remember one of my friends in high school would compare arms with me, and she was blonde hair, blue eyed, and her arm was the same color as mine from going to the tanning bed. So it was very, very common. And I think that, knowing those statistics, although they're scary, it just underscores the importance of getting in to see the dermatologist to make sure that you're doing all the right things to keep yourself safe and to detect anything early.
I think another thing that kind of came to my attention when I was thinking through and reading through this article was we talk a lot about derm deserts. And I think that is a huge thing that kind of factors into people not knowing about skin cancer, not knowing the risk, not knowing about melanoma is there's quite literally just a lack of resources available. And to tie back in Instagram, and one of the reasons it is amazing and social media is amazing is that these conversations are being had and everyone is on some form of social media seems like. So these conversations are really starting to reach people who might not have access to other resources and say things like, huh, oh, that's strange. My mole kind of looks like Leah's that she had on her chest that came back as melanoma. Well, maybe I need to figure out resources as well. And um, the only other thing attached to that is there are people who acknowledge that these derm deserts exist and are trying to get resources to communities that might not have access to other things. We've seen, the vans, the skin check vans going around. And I know one thing that we do as a company every May is we partner with a lot of schools and send them resources, which is really exciting that there are parents so dedicated to their kids' skin health that they are reaching out to sun protective brands, asking for samples, asking for flyers, asking for all of these things so that they can educate high schoolers, even middle schoolers,
Mhm.
about these things is really, really cool. And I hope that we start to see that not only in May when it's Melanoma Awareness Month, but throughout the entire year. Like, let's talk about if you're skiing, let's talk about when you're out playing in the snow. These things happen year round, not just in the summertime, but we are seeing more and more conversations reaching a wider audience, which is super exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I think the derm deserts concept is a really important thing that you brought up. I do love like the mobile skin cancer exams. I've participated in those with like our local fire department and things like that. And then I'm actually a traveling dermatologist. So I live in San Diego, but I work in places outside of the state and go to kind of more rural communities and do skin cancer surgery. And I think that's really important. There's a long wait list for a lot of the dermatologists' offices, and that does make it difficult. But I do think that, like we were saying, social media definitely has some downsides, but the upsides is that skincare education has really been like hugely democratized, and everyone has very good access on social media to skincare education, and it just brings awareness up a lot. And 5 years ago, like pre-COVID, I think that kind of like skincare education and awareness wasn't as universally available as it is now.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. All right, Leah, anything else on this story before we head back into the reality TV world?
No, let's wrap things up on a reality TV update.
You know I have to come back to this and is a little bit of a sad update because we have been following Teddi Mellencamp's story for quite a few months now. So this article is from Bravo TV as well. And the article is titled Teddi Mellencamp's Melanoma Cancer Has Spread, but she quoted, I will win this battle. So, like I said, taking things back to the reality TV world, Teddi shared on Instagram on March 6th to confirm that not all of the tumors in her brain were removed and that doctors have found more tumors in her lungs. So she writes on Instagram, I have multiple tumors in my brain that weren't able to be removed via surgery. I also have 2 tumors in my lungs. They're all metastases of my melanoma. The doctors are hopeful that immunotherapy will effectively treat them, and I'm feeling positive that I will win this battle. Now, as Bravo Andy would say, with all due F off cancer. Teddi initially announced that she had stage 2 melanoma back in 2022 and has been a super strong voice for the melanoma community in sharing her story. Yeah, I know we've shared a lot about Teddi Mellencamp's story, not just on the podcast, but we've also shared her updates on our personal social media channels as well. So I wanted to turn it over to you first to share your thoughts.
Yeah, Teddy's story definitely is absolutely heartbreaking. And, for somebody like Teddy that, you know, this wasn't her first round with melanoma or first rodeo. I mean, she's had multiple melanomas, like double digit instances with melanoma. And what's, interesting is, following her story, all of the melanomas were on her like upper back shoulder area, kind of all in one region. And, when I was following her story earlier on, when, before it metastasized just recently, she kind of came from a perspective of, I'm just going to another melanoma, let's tackle it, let's treat it, let's kind of move on. And, then something like this happens, and it's obviously devastating and heartbreaking. And, it really speaks to the power of what melanoma can do that a lot of people do not understand. And Teddy's story now resonates with me in how my dad's story is. So for listeners that know me and know my dad's story, I'm a melanoma survivor, but my dad's also a stage 4 metastatic melanoma warrior. His melanoma spread to his brain and lungs as well as Teddy's did. So Teddy's story really resonated with me, especially her most recent updates, because it reminded me a lot of what my dad's been through. Because my dad had stage 0 melanoma a month before my stage 1 melanoma back in 2019. And 2 years later, his melanoma came back with a vengeance and was stage 4 metastatic in his brain and lungs. And it was something we never saw coming, which I'm sure Teddi, felt the same way. And I think what's really interesting about Teddy's story and my dad's being so similar is, there's always a chance, no matter what your stage of melanoma was originally, your melanoma can come back, whether it's a different primary source of the melanoma or if there's a recurrence or what have you. Melanoma is very sneaky. It's a cancer that doesn't really mimic or relate to any other cancers. And it's very hard to treat. And that's why it's always, really something to be aware of that a lot of people aren't aware of, right?
Leah, my heart goes out for you and for your dad, especially because that's a really difficult thing to go through and to battle. And so it can be very devastating. And melanoma survivors, stage 4 especially, are just some of the strongest people that I know. When it comes to stage 4 and advanced treatment, immunotherapy has really done a lot, I think, for the landscape of advanced melanoma treatment. Before we had immunotherapy available, which, by the way, is like a systemic type of therapy, it's not chemotherapy, it's smarter, and it's essentially takes the brakes off of our immune system. So our immune system can go up into really high gear and target and kill cancer cells. And it's really changed the landscape for advanced melanoma and has given a lot of patients with stage 4 melanoma the opportunity to have a much better quality of life than we saw before it. So it's really changed the game, and it's constantly changing. There's always new research into it. When we go to dermatology meetings every year, it's really fascinating and instills a lot of hope to be able to learn about all of the new innovation and research that's being put into advanced melanoma treatments. So I am hopeful that as time goes on, that these survival rates and the quality of life for patients with stage 4 melanoma is going to get better.
Yeah, our hearts definitely go out to Teddi. I know as we hear all of these melanoma stories, our community resonates with them. We completely know all the feelings, and how hard it is to stay positive and hopeful and everything. So we really rally and turn to our community to help empower us and rally too. So as I saw this Instagram post from her, I went through and read all the comments, and there were just so many positive, uplifting, rallying comments that really just make you feel empowered by the community and really hopeful that she is able to continue battling even on days that it feels like are really hard. So our thoughts are with Teddi. And, as we really kind of close out, we want to turn it back over to you, Dr. Mani, to share any kind of closing thoughts, final tips as we head into the summer, for staying safe.
Yeah, May is Melanoma Month, and I'm so glad that you guys are doing this episode and bringing attention to it and having me on. The important things that I would encourage our audience to take away from this is don't wait, don't procrastinate, and take action. So if there's something that you notice on your skin, there's something that somebody else points out, something that looks a little suspicious to you, or you just don't feel right about, trust your gut and do something about it. Don't wait, because melanoma can spread in not months, but weeks. And so time is really of the essence. The number two thing that we talked about is sun protection, obviously using all the different tools that we have to be able to protect ourselves. So not just sunscreen, not just clothing, not just shade, but doing all three. Um, and and also knowing that it is possible to live a full life and enjoy being outside while not being scared all the time. I think a lot of people who've had skin cancer have a lot of anxiety around being in the sun. And it's still possible to enjoy the sun, but in a smart and safe way.
Mhm. I agree. And I love that you say that because I think it's totally fair that when you go through melanoma or even just a biopsy, even if it comes back totally fine, your brain kind of shifts in a lot of cases. To sun safety and saying, okay, should I fear being outside? And as we're heading into summer, I'm someone who loves being outside. I love hiking. I love biking. I love being at the pool and everything like that. And yes, I have had a bunch of precancerous biopsies and my mom's melanoma kind of fueling my sun safety. But I'm not going to stop doing the things I love. I'm just going to use all of the tools kind of in my arsenal to do those things safely. And yes, I'm probably going to go out for my morning run at 6 a.m. instead of
Yeah.
at noon.
Yes.
Those are things that also are they make total sense. It's okay. Those are trade-offs that don't really impact your life and well-being. And I know Leah's nodding because she is an avid runner and talks about making all of these choices in her life to continue doing things that she loves to do. So that's great. That's such great tips as we head into summer. And if everyone listening wants to connect with you, which I know that they're going to want to, where can they find you on Instagram, your YouTube channel? Do you want to give a shout out to those resources?
Yeah, I would love to connect with our audience. You can follow me on Instagram at Mani, Mani, .j, spelled Jaye .md. That's my Instagram, and I like to post helpful, kind of quick skincare education tips, as well as like real world practical tips for work life balance and productivity and things like that. And then my YouTube channel is where I post a lot more in depth, kind of long form content. And that's at Mani, again, ManiJayemd, no punctuation. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you there.
Yeah, and we're going to add all of that in the show notes. Our community loves rallying behind everyone in this community. So I would not be surprised if they listen to this episode and beeline to follow you and watch your videos on YouTube and support you in all the ways. Dr. Mani, thank you so much for joining us. Leah and I were so thrilled when you said yes and agreed to join us. And we're so excited to continue this conversation as we spread the word and spread awareness throughout May.
Thank you for having me. This was great.